I stood outside the door with my hand frozen on the handle, my heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted out of my chest before I did something I couldn't undo. Through the frosted glass, I could see shapes moving, a woman's silhouette, laughing, a man's hand on her shoulder, my wife's shoulder. 10 minutes earlier, an anonymous number had sent me a photo that shattered 8 years of trust in half a second. My wife, Mia, walking into a hotel with a man I'd never seen before, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. I had my car keys in my fist so tight the metal bit into my palm. I was seconds from throwing that door open and ending my marriage right there in a hallway that smelled like carpet cleaner and cheap cologne. But I didn't open it, and that decision, the choice to wait, to watch, to swallow the scream building in my throat. That's what changed everything. Because what I found on the other side of that door wasn't the ending of my marriage. It was the beginning of understanding how little I actually knew about the people I loved. My name's Daniel. I'm 34, I work as a structural engineer, and for 8 years I've been married to a woman named Mia, an architect with paint permanently stained under her fingernails and an opinion about every building we ever walked past. She'd point at some glass tower downtown and mutter "criminal" under her breath. Then 5 minutes later stop dead in front of some crumbling brick warehouse like it was the Sistine Chapel. I fell in love with that. The way she saw things nobody else bothered to look at twice. We met in college, in a design class I wasn't even supposed to be in. Wrong room, wrong building, and somehow the best mistake of my life. She wore this oversized flannel shirt covered in charcoal smudges, and when the professor asked her to critique my model, she tore it apart in front of the whole class, and then, without missing a beat, told me exactly how to fix it. I asked her to coffee that same afternoon. She said yes on one condition, that I never build anything ugly as long as I lived. I've spent 8 years trying to keep that promise. Our anniversary was always our sacred night. No phones, no work talk, just the two of us and whatever ridiculous tradition we'd started that year. Badly cooked pasta, a bottle of wine neither of us could pronounce, dancing in the kitchen to music from a playlist we called Terrible But Ours. This year should have been no different. I had the whole night planned. Candles, her favorite jazz record spinning on the turntable I'd fixed just for the occasion. A small velvet box tucked in my jacket pocket with a bracelet she'd been eyeing for months. At 6:15, my phone buzzed. Mia. Baby, I am so sorry. Client emergency. Might be here till midnight. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Love you so much. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Something about the timing felt off, though I couldn't name what. I told myself it was nothing. Architects have late nights. That's the job. I'd married a woman with ambition, and ambition doesn't clock out at 5. So I sat at our kitchen table, alone, with 2 plates of pasta going cold, and I waited. By 8, the candles had burned down to stubs. I'd texted her twice, casual, not clingy, just thinking of you and a heart emoji, and gotten nothing back, not even the 3 dots that meant she was typing. That's when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. I think you deserve to know the truth about tonight. Attached was a photo. Mia, in the dress I'd bought her for her birthday, stepping through the revolving door of the Ashcroft Hotel downtown, the fancy one with the rooftop bar we'd always joked we'd never be able to afford. Beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark coat, hand resting lightly on the small of her back like he'd done it 100 times before. I sat there staring at that photo until the screen dimmed and went black on its own. My mind did what every mind does in that moment. It built an entire story out of nothing. A story with a name and a face and a betrayal timeline. I saw 8 years collapse into a single ugly punchline. I saw myself as the fool who fixed record players while his wife built a second life downtown. I grabbed my keys. The drive there is mostly a blur now, streetlights blending into smears, my hands too tight on the wheel, my jaw so clenched it ached for days afterward. I kept replaying every late night she'd had this year, every client emergency, every time she'd turned her phone face down on the counter like it was nothing. I parked 2 blocks from the Ashcroft and walked the rest, because some part of me, some cold, clear part I didn't know I had, didn't want to arrive loud. I didn't want to be the man who screeches into a parking lot and makes a scene. I wanted to see first. I needed to know what I was walking into before I destroyed it. The lobby was warm and gold-lit, all marble and hushed piano music, the kind of place that makes you feel underdressed just for breathing. I asked the front desk, in a voice that came out steadier than I felt, whether they'd seen a woman matching Mia's description. The young man at the desk hesitated. the universal look of someone who's been trained not to give out information, until I described the dress, the coat, and mentioned quietly that I was her husband. "Private event room," he said finally. "Third floor, the Windsor suite." A private event room, not a bar, not a bedroom, a room booked for something. I took the stairs instead of the elevator because I needed the extra 90 seconds to figure out what kind of man I was about to become. When I reached the third floor, the hallway was quiet except for the low murmur of voices behind a set of double doors, and beneath that door, warm light spilled out in a thin gold line across the carpet. I stood there. My hand found the handle. That's the exact moment from the beginning, the frozen second where my whole future sat balanced on whether I turned that handle or walked away. I didn't open it. Instead, I found a gap in the curtains covering the side window, small enough that most people would never notice, and I looked through. What I saw made no sense at first. My brain kept trying to force it into the shape of betrayal because that's the story I'd already written on the drive over. There was a long table covered in rolled blueprints. A cake, small, home-style, definitely not hotel catering, sat on a side table with white frosting that read, "Happy 8th, Daniel and Mia" in handwriting I recognized immediately as Mia's best friend, Priya's terrible cursive. String lights were taped along the ceiling in a lazy, half-finished loop like someone had run out of time, and Mia stood at the center of it, sleeves pushed up, gesturing animatedly at a large architectural rendering pinned to a corkboard. The man from the photo stood beside her, nodding, making notes on a clipboard. I couldn't hear much through the glass, but I caught fragments. "The east wall needs to come down. He's going to lose his mind. We have 4 weeks before the lease starts." None of it made sense to me. Not yet. I stood in that hallway for almost 20 minutes, watching my wife's face. The face I knew better than my own. Light up the way it only did when she was building something she believed in. She wasn't looking at that man the way a woman looks at someone she's betraying her marriage with. She was looking at him the way she looked at me 8 years ago, tearing apart a bad design in front of a classroom, already 3 steps ahead, already fixing it. I walked away from that door without opening it. I told myself I needed more information before I let myself feel anything at all. I didn't go home. I sat in my car in the hotel parking garage for almost 2 hours, phone in my lap, waiting to see who would come out and when. At around 11, the man from the photo left first. He walked with the loose, tired posture of someone who'd been on his feet all day, pulling out his own phone and putting it to his ear before he even reached his car. I caught just enough of his side of the conversation drifting across the quiet garage. "Yeah, we're on schedule. No, tell your mom I'll be home in 20. Love you too, Rachel." Rachel. I sat with that name for a long moment. A man calling home to a wife named Rachel doesn't fit the story I'd built. I looked him up that night. I'm not proud of it, but I did. His name was Marcus Chen, a general contractor with a small firm 2 towns over, married for 6 years, 2 kids, a dog named Biscuit, visible in half his public photos. Nothing about his life suggested a man having an affair with my wife, which meant the man in the photo wasn't the story at all. He was a contractor, and the woman in that photo, my wife, wasn't cheating on me. She was planning something. With blueprints and a lease starting in 4 weeks and a cake with our anniversary written on it in her best friend's handwriting. Relief hit me first, so hard my hands actually shook on the steering wheel. Then, right behind it, came something uglier. Anger. Not at Mia. At myself, for the 2 hours I'd spent building an entire fictional betrayal out of a single photograph and my own insecurity. But underneath both of those feelings sat a question I couldn't shake. Who sent me that photo? And why? Whoever it was had known exactly where Mia would be, exactly when, and had taken the picture at precisely the angle designed to make it look damning. That wasn't a coincidence. That was intention. Somebody wanted me to believe my wife was cheating. Somebody wanted to walk into that room and blow up 8 years of marriage in front of a cake with our names on it. I went home. I blew out the dead candles, put the cold pasta in the fridge, and sat on our couch in the dark, turning my phone over and over in my hands. Mia got home a little after midnight, exhausted, apologizing before she'd even closed the door, still convinced I believed her cover story about a client emergency. I watched her drop her bag by the entryway, kick off her heels, and sink onto the couch beside me with a sigh that sounded like 6 months of stress condensed into one breath. "I'm so sorry about tonight," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "I promise I'll make it up to you. I have something big planned. I just need a little more time." Every instinct in me wanted to tell her everything: the photo, the hotel, the hallway. But something held me back. If she was planning a surprise, telling her I'd already seen it would ruin whatever she'd been building toward. And after everything I'd just put myself through, some part of me wanted to protect that for her. For us. So instead, I asked something smaller. Something I actually needed to know. "Mia," I said carefully, "has anything strange been happening at work? Anyone acting weird around you? Around us?" She lifted her head, studying my face the way she studies a flawed blueprint, looking for the crack. "Why do you ask?" I told her about the photo, not the hotel part, just that I'd received an anonymous message with a picture of her, meant to look bad. Her face went through about 4 expressions in 5 seconds. Confusion, then something sharper, something almost like recognition, before she settled into a controlled, careful calm that told me she knew exactly who might have sent it. "Vanessa," she said quietly. Vanessa Reyes had worked at Mia's firm for the past year and a half, a junior architect who transferred in from another office with what Mia had once called, half-joking, way too much interest in my husband. I remembered her vaguely from a holiday party 2 years ago. She'd cornered me by the drink table, asked a lot of questions about my work, laughed too hard at things that weren't especially funny, and touched my arm twice in a way that made me quietly relieved when Mia appeared and looped her arm through mine. I hadn't thought about her since. Mia apparently had. "She's been off all year," Mia said, her voice tightening. "Little things, taking credit for ideas in meetings, showing up wherever I am at conferences. A few weeks ago she asked me completely out of nowhere whether you and I were still solid. I brushed it off because I didn't want to make it a bigger deal than it needed to be. I didn't want you to worry over nothing." "It's not nothing," I said. "Someone sent me a photo designed to break us up, Mia. That's not an office crush. That's a plan." We sat with that for a long moment, the quiet stretching between us, heavier now than any silence we'd had in years. Then Mia said something that reframed everything. "The reason I was at the Ashcroft tonight," she said slowly, "is because I'm opening a restaurant. For you. For us. Marcus is the contractor. Priya's doing the interior. I signed the lease on the old Hendricks building 3 weeks ago, the one with the brick facade you always said reminded you of the warehouse we met near in school. I wanted it finished by our anniversary next year as a surprise, a place that's ours. I've been sneaking around for months, and Vanessa has clearly been watching me closely enough to notice, and twisted whatever she saw into something ugly enough to send to you." I sat there stunned by 2 things at once. The overwhelming, almost dizzying relief that the woman I loved had spent months secretly building me a dream out of brick and blueprints, and the cold, creeping realization that someone in her workplace had been quietly, patiently trying to burn that dream to the ground out of what could only be some twisted version of wanting me for herself. "She's been sending you things," Mia said, more to herself than to me. "Hasn't she? This wasn't the first time." I hesitated, then admitted it. 2 months earlier, I'd gotten a strange, unsigned note at my office, something vague about keeping an eye on people who don't appreciate what they have. I'd assumed it was a prank from a coworker and thrown it away without a second thought. I hadn't mentioned it to Mia because it seemed so small, so easy to dismiss. Looking back, it was never small. It was the first thread in a pattern neither of us had noticed until it was pulled tight enough to nearly strangle our marriage. We didn't sleep that night. We sat at the kitchen table with 2 cold plates of pasta pushed to the side, piecing together a timeline that had been unfolding in the background of our lives for over a year, comments Mia had brushed off, meetings that mysteriously excluded her, a misplaced email that had once nearly cost her a project, and now an anonymous photo engineered to look like an affair. The next morning, Mia went straight to her firm's managing partner with everything. The note I'd received, the photo, the pattern of behavior she'd documented once she started looking for it with clear eyes instead of giving Vanessa the benefit of the doubt. Vanessa didn't deny much when confronted. According to Mia, she broke down almost immediately, admitting she'd followed Mia to the hotel that night out of what she called concern, taken the photo, and sent it anonymously because she'd convinced herself that Mia didn't deserve a marriage she wasn't sure Mia even wanted anymore. It wasn't really about Mia at all, not fully. It was about a woman who'd built an entire fantasy out of someone else's life and decided she was entitled to dismantle it. She was let go from the firm within the week. I never spoke to her directly, and honestly, I didn't need to. Some conversations aren't worth having if the goal is just to feel a little more righteous for 5 minutes. What stayed with me wasn't Vanessa in the end. It was the 20 minutes I stood outside that hotel room, hand on the door, ready to destroy something real because of a single photograph and my own worst assumptions. If I'd thrown that door open the way every instinct told me to, I would have humiliated Mia in front of her contractor, her best friend, and a cake with our names on it, over a surprise she'd spent nearly a year building out of love. I would have proven every insecure thought I'd ever had about not being enough for her, and I would have handed Vanessa exactly the outcome she wanted, without her ever having to say another word. The restaurant opened 11 months later, on our 9th anniversary, in the old Hendricks building with the brick facade I'd always loved without knowing why. Mia kept the original warehouse windows, exposed the brick, and hung a single black and white photo near the entrance, a picture of the two of us from that first disastrous design class, the one where she tore my project apart and then fixed it in the same breath. We named the place the Frozen Handle. Only the two of us and Priya know why. Every time I walk through that door now, I think about how close I came to ending something real over a story I told myself in the dark, built entirely out of fear instead of fact. I think about how easy it is in this world of screenshots and anonymous numbers and photos stripped of all their context to let someone else's cruelty write the final chapter of your life for you. The truth is, trust isn't something you feel once and keep forever. It's something you choose again, actively, in the exact moment it would be easiest not to. Usually with your hand already on the door, your heart already halfway to a conclusion you haven't earned yet. I'm grateful, more than I can really put into words, that I chose to wait that night instead of walking in and burning it all down. Not everyone gets a second chance to find out the truth before the damage is already done, so here's what I want to know from you. If you were standing outside that door with a photo like that in your hand, do you think you would have waited, or would you have walked in? And if someone you trusted had been quietly working to destroy your relationship the way Vanessa did, would you have wanted to hear them explain themselves, or would you have walked away without a word? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.